All right, this is really a question that no one should be getting wrong. Now, many of you are going to know how to do this very quickly and confidently because you are good at algebra. So if that is you understand what they're asking, right? They want us to get A alone, and we're thinking, how would we get A alone? What would we need to do? Well, A is being multiplied by two different things, by the 8 and this term B plus 9. So if we wanted to get A alone, we would undo the multiplication using its opposite, division. So we would divide by 8 and by B plus 9. And I can do them both at the same time and just kind of treat it like a whole fraction here. So when we do that on the right side, the 8s will cancel, the B plus 9 will cancel, leaving us just with A alone. But then, of course, you can't, all of algebra is premised on the idea that you got to do things to both sides. It's got to be equal. So we also have to divide by 8 times B plus 9 on the other side. And you can already see it, right? Like there's nothing to do with that. It's just x over 8 times B plus 9. That is an answer. That is choice B. That's it. So ideally, this would be a 10-second question. You just know how the algebra works and you're able to kind of see that move. But, you know, I know some of us are just not very good at algebra. And so what are we going to do instead? Well, we have some other methods. And I want to show you one. This is definitely not the most efficient way to do it, but it's a good question for us to talk about a new strategy, arithmetize. So let me clear this out a bit. What I would want to do is recognize that when they say that A, B, and X are all constants, their values don't matter. And I know that they don't matter because if I look at the choices, I also have X, A, and B all in the answers. And so they're just kind of these placeholders, these carry-throughs. So if you're bothered by having so many of these things, we can make them disappear by picking random numbers for these letters. So here's what I'm going to do. And I kind of know what numbers to pick because I'm being smart about it, but I'm going to make A equal to 2 and B equal to 1. Now, I could have flipped it. I could have done A as 1 and B as 2. I could have done them both as 1. I could have done 1 as 17 if I wanted to. I have a lot of flexibility here, but I'm just trying to be smart about it for the sake of just teaching you a strategy. Now, by doing this, what I'm doing is I'm actually giving a value to X as well. So I'm not going to make a random number up for X, but I recognize now that X is going to be 8 times 2 times 1 plus 9, right? Because if I make A 2, then I can substitute that in. If I make B 1, I can substitute that in. So that's 16 times 10. So X is 160, right? So that number did not get made up. It got made up by the other numbers, right? Because there's a kind of relationship between these things that the equation is helping us with. Now, what I want to do is I want these same three numbers, X being 160, A being 2, B being 1. Those same three numbers should work in the equations that I'm given in the choices. That's how this is supposed to go. Now, I'm not going to plug in the A as 2 because I kind of know that all of these are supposed to equal 2. But if I plug in the other side, it should work out to 2. But watch what happens. So if we do choice A, we would have 160 divided by 8 minus 1 plus 9. So one challenge with arithmetize is sometimes we have a lot of numbers. And we got to keep track of all those numbers. So you got to use your scratch paper. So that's 160 divided by 8. That's 20 minus 10. Well, that's 10, right? So that doesn't work, right? We want it to be 2, right? So that does not equal 2. So that means that A is wrong. It's supposed to give us this value of 2 that we made up for A. It didn't work. But if we go to choice B, what we know is the right answer. That's 160 for X over 8 times 1 plus 9. So that's 160 divided by 8 times 10, which is 80. And 160 divided by 80 is 2. So that works out. Now, we do need to try all of the other choices because it's always possible that the numbers we picked happened to work in multiple answers. That's not the end of the world. It would just mean that when we're done with everything, we got to pick new numbers and try them in the choices that are left. And that's kind of why I picked A being 2. Because if I made A equal to 1, then choice C would have worked as well, right? This is 8 times 10 over 160. So that for us is 80 over 160, which is a half. But think about it. If this were 1 over 1 for both B and C, then we'd have a problem. They'd both come out to 1. And so that, you know, if that doesn't make sense, you don't worry about it. But that is something that can happen. And with practice with arithmetize, you'll get better at knowing kind of how to avoid those mistakes and those kinds of dead ends. But let's just finish it off here. So this would be that 2 is supposed to equal to 8 times 160 times 1 plus 9. So I don't even need to do the math. This is 8 times 160 times 10. This is a huge number. It's not going to be 2. So there you go. Now, as you saw, right, that is way more time consuming than what we did originally, which is just understand the algebra. But I'm thinking about students who really stink at algebra. And if that's you, you just gotta be honest with yourself sometimes. And that's okay. The point though is this stuff in the rest of this module is gonna get much harder. And you just need to get the most right answers as possible. I would rather you spend 2 or 3 minutes getting this number 14 correct, where we know that with persistence and just practice, you can get this, versus rushing through it, getting it wrong, or skipping it, and then going to other questions later on that you're just as incapable of answering. And so now you've gotten twice as many questions wrong. The hard ones that you knew you were going to get wrong at the end, plus something like this that you could have, if you just spent more time on it, gotten yourself a right answer. So for both the PSAT and the SAT, the main goal is maximize correct answers. Sometimes that means if the right, easy, quick way doesn't work for you, you've got to work on it the harder way, the more time-consuming way, to guarantee points wherever you have the option. Questions like this where we can arithmetize, you can't get this wrong, even if it takes you a little bit extra time.